My mother-in-law booked my restaurant for her 60th birthday gala, and then told the staff I wasn't allowed to attend. Yes, you read that right. Security had my name on a do not admit list. What she didn't understand was simple. I don't just manage the place. I own the entire building. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Callan Mercer. I'm 38 years old, and 5 years ago I built Harbor and Pine from the ground up in downtown Savannah. I didn't inherit it. I didn't marry into it. I worked for it. Long nights. Personal loans. Risk after risk. When I married Alara Whitmore, I knew her family came from old Southern money. Her mother, Brenna Whitmore, made sure I knew it too. She never insulted me directly. Instead, she smiled politely and said things like, "You're very driven," in a tone that meant, "You don't belong here." Still, I ignored it. I focused on my work and my marriage. 3 months ago, Brenna asked to book Harbor and Pine for her birthday. Full buyout. Black tie event. High-profile guests. I agreed without hesitation. Business is business. But 2 weeks before the event, my floor manager, Maribel, knocked on my office door looking nervous. She handed me a printed email. It was from Brenna. She had instructed security that I was not to attend the party. She described me as non-essential staff. Non-essential. In my own building. At first, I thought it was a misunderstanding. I called Alara. She sounded uncomfortable but calm. She said her mother wanted the evening to feel like a Whitmore family celebration. She asked me to just let it go for one night. One night. That's how disrespect starts. Quiet. Polite. Easy to excuse. I didn't argue with her on the phone. I simply sat there after the call ended and stared at the skyline through my office window. Everything I built was downstairs. Every chair chosen by me. Every contract signed by me. And somehow I was the outsider. That was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't just about a party. It was about erasing me from something I created. And I wasn't going to let that happen. The days after I found out about the ban felt strange. On the outside, everything at the restaurant ran smoothly. Reservations were full. Staff moved confidently. The kitchen worked like a machine. But inside me, something had shifted. I started noticing things I had ignored for years. Like how Brenna always introduced Harbor and Pine to her friends as my daughter's place. Never mine. Like how she told people her family's connections were the reason it became successful. As if my sleepless nights and financial risks were just background details. I remembered our first Thanksgiving after Alara and I got married. Brenna had raised a glass and said, "We're so proud to support young entrepreneurs." Support. I had never taken a single dollar from them. Even Roderick, her husband, treated me like a temporary addition. Polite but distant. As if he was waiting to see whether I would last. And Trenton? He was worse. He joked about my Ohio accent. Asked if I missed construction boots whenever I showed up in a suit. I used to laugh it off. I thought being the bigger man meant staying quiet. But silence doesn't earn respect from people who already look down on you. One evening, Alara and I sat at the dining table at home. The house was quiet. I asked her honestly, "Do you believe I built Harbor and Pine on my own?" She looked confused. "Of course you did. Then why does your family act like it belongs to them?" She hesitated before answering. "They just feel connected to it." Connected. That word again. Soft. Harmless. But heavy. "They feel proud," she added. "You should take it as a compliment. A compliment doesn't remove your name from the door." Over the next week, I stayed calm. I didn't confront Brenna. I didn't cancel the booking. I wanted to see how far this would go. Then Maribel brought me something else, a draft of the event program. At the top it read, "Whitmore Legacy Celebration, honoring 60 years of leadership." Leadership. As if Brenna had built the walls herself. I asked Maribel where she got it. She said Trenton had approved the design and told vendors to treat the venue as family property. That's when it stopped being disrespect. It became intentional. That night, I went into my private office and pulled out the original property deed from the safe. My name was the only one listed. Not Alara's. Not any Whitmore. Every signature was mine. Every risk was mine. And for the first time, instead of feeling hurt, I felt clear. They thought I would stay quiet because I always had. They thought I would protect their image because I loved my wife. But love doesn't mean allowing yourself to disappear. The gala was 2 weeks away, and I was done being invisible. As the gala got closer, the restaurant slowly stopped feeling like mine. Decorators began arriving with samples of gold fabric and oversized floral arrangements. Trenton walked through the dining room giving instructions like he owned the place. He didn't even look at me when he spoke to the staff. "Move those tables closer together," he said one afternoon. "We need space for the Whitmore backdrop." Whitmore backdrop. I stood a few feet away, listening. None of the staff questioned him because they assumed he had authority through me. I didn't correct them. Not yet. That evening, I found Alara reviewing seating charts at the kitchen counter at home. Names of investors, judges, and local officials were neatly written in gold ink. "You invited half the city," I said quietly. "It's important," she replied. "Mom wants this to be unforgettable." I looked at the guest list. Every powerful contact her family valued was there. "But I'm not allowed to attend," I reminded her. She pressed her lips together. "Callan, it's just one night." She feels uncomfortable with tension. "Tension?" I asked. "Or control?" She stood up, frustrated now. "Why does everything have to be a fight with you?" That question hit harder than she intended. I hadn't fought. I had stayed silent for years. The next morning, Maribel came to me again, looking uneasy. "Sir, security wants to confirm your exclusion for Saturday. They've been told not to let you in under any circumstances." Under any circumstances. I nodded slowly and told her to continue following the event schedule exactly as instructed. Then I did something I rarely do. I reviewed every single document related to the booking. The contract was clear. The venue could not be publicly presented as owned by anyone other than the legal title holder. Any violation allowed immediate cancellation. I printed 3 copies of that clause. Then I printed the email where Brenna referred to Harbor and Pine as our family estate venue. I didn't feel emotional anymore. I felt organized. On the afternoon of the event, I arrived early and stayed upstairs in my private office. From the security monitors, I watched guests arrive in black suits and glittering gowns. Champagne flowed. Laughter filled the room. Brenna stood near the entrance greeting people like a queen hosting court. She looked proud, confident, victorious. At 7:30 p.m., the ballroom was full. At 7:40 p.m., the string quartet finished their opening piece. At 7:45 p.m., Brenna stepped toward the stage to begin her speech. And that was the moment I stood up from my chair, picked up the folder containing the deed and contract, and headed for the stairs. If she wanted a legacy moment, she was about to have one. I walked down the staircase slowly, not rushing, not hiding. The music had stopped, and the room was glowing under soft golden lights. Waiters stood near the walls holding silver trays. Guests turned their heads as I entered the ballroom. Security noticed me immediately. One of them stepped forward, unsure. "Sir, we were told." "It's fine," I said calmly, continuing past him. The closer I got to the stage, the quieter the room became. Brenna was holding the microphone, smiling at her audience. When she saw me walking toward her, her smile tightened. She leaned toward me and whispered sharply, "You need to leave." I didn't raise my voice. "I won't." Without asking permission, I stepped onto the stage beside her. The microphone was still live. I gently took it from her hand before she could react. "Good evening, everyone," I said clearly. The room froze. "My name is Callan Mercer. For those of you who may not know, I'm the owner of Harbor and Pine." A few confused murmurs passed through the crowd. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight. However, before this celebration continues, there's something that needs to be clarified." Brenna tried to interrupt me, but I kept speaking. "This venue has been presented as part of the Whitmore estate. That information is incorrect." The silence grew heavier. I opened the folder and held up the official property deed. "This entire building is legally owned by me. Because of a contractual violation involving misrepresentation of ownership, tonight's event is now officially terminated." Gasps spread across the room. For a moment, no one moved. Then I gave a small nod toward Maribel near the back of the room. She understood immediately. The bar staff stopped pouring drinks. Servers quietly began removing trays. The string quartet began packing their instruments. Brenna's face had turned pale. "You can't do this," she whispered angrily. "I can," I replied softly. And I just did. Roderick pushed through the crowd toward the stage. "This is outrageous," he snapped. "What's outrageous?" I answered calmly. "Is banning someone from his own property." Alara stood near the front table, completely still. She looked hurt, shocked and confused all at once. Guests began leaving quietly. Some avoided eye contact. Others gave small nods of understanding as they passed me. No one wanted to be caught in the middle. Within 15 minutes, the ballroom was nearly empty. Decorations still hung from the ceiling, but the energy had vanished. Brenna stood alone beneath the large gold banner with her family name printed across it. For the first time since I had known her, she looked small. I handed her a printed copy of the deed and stepped off the stage. The party she had planned for months was over. But the real consequences were just beginning. When the last guest walked out, the ballroom felt hollow. Half-empty glasses sat on tables. The gold banner with the Whitmore name still hung behind the stage, but now it looked almost embarrassing. Brenna didn't say another word to me. Roderick guided her toward the exit, his jaw tight with anger. Trenton shot me a look that promised revenge, but he followed them out without speaking. Alara stayed behind. She walked toward me slowly. The room was quiet except for staff cleaning up in the background. "Was that necessary?" she asked. Her voice wasn't angry. It was tired. "Yes," I answered. "You embarrassed my family." I corrected them. She shook her head. "You could have called Mom privately." "I tried to handle it privately," I said. "I was told to stay out of it." She looked down at the floor. For a moment, I thought she might finally admit that this had gone too far. Instead, she said something that changed everything. "You always make things bigger than they need to be." That sentence settled between us like a wall. I realized then that we were seeing two different realities. To me, this was about respect and ownership. To her, it was about protecting her family's pride. We went home separately that night. The next morning, I received a call from a law office representing the Whitmores. The attorney's tone was formal and controlled. He claimed I had caused financial damage and emotional distress. I listened quietly. Then I told him to review the signed contract carefully. I even offered to email him the highlighted clause myself. 2 days later, the tone changed. The legal threat softened. By the end of the week, they stopped completely. They had no case. But the damage inside my marriage was deeper than any lawsuit. Alara began staying at her parents' estate more often. When she was home, conversations were short and cold. We avoided talking about the gala entirely. One evening, she stood in the doorway of my office at home. "I think I need some space," she said. "How much space?" I asked. She hesitated. "I don't know." A week later, she packed 2 suitcases and left. There was no dramatic fight. No screaming. Just quiet distance. As her car drove away, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness because I still loved her. Relief because I no longer had to fight to exist in my own life. Harbor and Pine continued running smoothly. In fact, business increased. Some guests privately told me they respected what I did. Not loudly, not publicly, but quietly. And sometimes quiet support is stronger than loud applause. Still, when I walked into my empty house at night, the silence reminded me that winning something can still cost you something else. And I was only beginning to understand what that cost would be. The house felt different after Alara left. Not messy, not broken, just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you think too much. At first, I kept expecting her to come back through the door with an apology, or at least a conversation. But days turned into weeks, and the distance between us became normal. We spoke only when necessary. Short phone calls about shared accounts. A few emails about logistics. Nothing personal. Then one afternoon, a certified envelope arrived. Divorce papers. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at them for a long time before opening them. The reason listed was simple: irreconcilable differences. No accusations. No dramatic claims. Just a clean break. She wasn't asking for the building or the restaurant. Her attorney must have explained the ownership clearly. There was no legal ground to stand on there. Reading those papers hurt more than the gala ever did. Because this wasn't about contracts. This was about 2 people who had stopped choosing each other. I signed them quietly a week later. When I dropped the envelope at the courier office, I felt something close. Not with anger. Not with revenge. Just closure. Back at Harbor and Pine, I focused on work. The upstairs office spaces that had been sitting empty for months finally found tenants. 2 small law firms signed long-term leases. The building felt fuller. Stable. I promoted Maribel to operations director. She had handled the gala situation with professionalism and loyalty. She deserved recognition. One afternoon, while reviewing financial reports, my assistant knocked gently on my office door. "Someone is here to see you," she said. "Do I have a meeting scheduled?" "No." She said, "It's personal." I walked into the conference room upstairs and stopped at the doorway. It was Brenna. She looked different. Not weaker, but quieter. No diamonds. No dramatic presence. Just a navy blazer and folded hands resting on the table. "I won't take much of your time," she said when I entered. I didn't sit immediately. "What can I help you with?" She took a slow breath. "We're organizing a regional charity event later this year. We'd like to reserve your venue." "Your venue?" "Not ours. Not family property. Mine." I studied her face carefully. There was no arrogance in her tone this time. Only restraint. "I'm afraid we're fully booked," I said calmly. Her jaw tightened slightly. She clearly wasn't used to being refused. "This event is important," she added. "So is respect," I replied. She didn't argue. She didn't threaten legal action. She simply nodded once, stood up, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she paused. "You've made your point," she said quietly. I met her eyes. "No. I protected what I built." She left without another word. And as the door closed behind her, I realized something important. The real shift wasn't that she needed my venue. It was that she finally understood she didn't control it. Months passed after that meeting. Life became steady again. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just steady. Harbor End Pine continued to grow. The restaurant earned a regional award for excellence in service. The upstairs offices were fully leased. For the first time since opening, I felt financially secure without needing to prove anything to anyone. I stopped checking my phone hoping for messages from Alara. I stopped replaying the gala night in my head. I focused on what was in front of me. One afternoon, nearly a year after everything happened, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address. The handwriting was familiar. It was from Alara. She wrote that she had started therapy. She admitted that for most of her life, she had allowed her mother to speak for her. She said she didn't realize how much she had minimized my work to keep peace in her family. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask to come back. She simply wrote, "I hope one day you remember that I loved you, even when I didn't defend you." I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and placed it inside my desk drawer. Not because it didn't matter, but because some apologies come too late to rebuild what was lost. That evening, after closing hours, I walked alone through the dining room. The lights were dim. The chairs were stacked neatly on tables. The air still carried the faint scent of food and polished wood. I stopped in the center of the room and looked around. 5 years earlier, this space had been empty concrete and dust. I had taken a risk when no one believed in the idea. I had signed loans with shaking hands. I had painted walls myself to save money. Every corner carried a piece of my effort. And for a long time, I let other people speak over that effort. I confused silence with strength. But strength isn't staying quiet when someone erases you. Strength is standing calmly and saying, "No, I didn't win that night because I embarrassed someone. I didn't win because a party ended early. I won because I stopped shrinking to make other people comfortable." Brenna never contacted me again. The Whitmores moved their events elsewhere. Our lives separated completely. And that was fine. Because revenge doesn't always look like anger. Sometimes it looks like growth. Sometimes it looks like peace. And sometimes it looks like standing alone in a room you built yourself, knowing no one can take it from you.